Would you please do a roll call, Mr. Secretary?
Christian Guzman.
I'm here.
Melanie Lebrecq.
Here.
Chris Valle.
Here.
And Vic Christensen here. We have a full house and therefore a quorum.
Okay, very good. And I did see that we have some guests here, so welcome to all those in attendance. So we'll move on now. We'll take up some public comment. Would anyone from the public like to make a comment on a non-agenda item? Raise your hand and then we'll look for it.
Yeah,
Okay.
faster.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
I just always call in and like to listen in. I'm working late. I thought you guys would keep me company while I'm working late. I really don't have anything except to say hello. I don't want to seem like a creeper just listening into the meeting. So I want to say hello and Happy New Year, which I think I can say this late in the year, given that we haven't talked to each other. That's all I got. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Yeah, we could say, what is it, Gung Hei Fa Choi also, right?
Exactly. Thank you.
You haven't heard of NPR? They all have all kinds of good stuff.
Thank you.
We'll try and keep up.
Anyone else? Anyone from the public?
Oh, and I do need to, I need to jump off at 6:30. I can get back on in the car, but I've got to head out there. So there'll be a little break.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Secretary or Mr. Vice President, would you mind sharing the agenda on the screen, if that's possible?
Where's my buttons? Oh. Got that?
Okay, very good. All right then, well, let's move on to the third item on our agenda, which is a review of the rules of order. And so I wanted to take this moment, and there was also a supplement that I gave to the secretary, and I think he posted on the agenda. So you don't have to share that, but it's available for the public if they want to go on there. And then just to say, as your chairman and president, my goal for the meetings is to facilitate it and to guide all of the participants in a healthy and meaningful discussion, and to keep things relatively expedient so that we can make the most of our time for the public's behalf. And so I wanted to go over briefly a couple of points that I think might be useful for the executive officers and any other council members to help us keep the meetings a little bit more expedient and orderly, perhaps even a little more civil. And so in addition to that, I wanted to bring up these items because sometimes, even if I know what can be done to make the meetings a little more orderly, if you don't understand what's going on or what terms I might say, then there's a little bit of a disconnect. And so if we kind of run through some important ones, make sure we understand the terms, I think that would help. So one good one is point of order, or if you want to be formal, you could say I rise to a point of order, Mr. Chair, or I rise to a point of order, Madam Chair, if there's a female leading a particular meeting or committee. And then if you rise to a point of order and state your point, whether it be someone is talking out of term or the words that someone is speaking is not relevant to the item on the agenda, then I might say your point is well taken or your point is not well taken after I consider it for a moment. And then if it's well taken, then we'll kind of correct the course of action as a governmental body. And if it's not well taken, then I will have deemed it that whatever was said is in line with what we're doing. So that's kind of a judgment. And then another kind of related item is called point of parliamentary inquiry, kind of similar to point of order, but it's kind of not necessarily for me to make a judgment, or like, it's not for me to make a decision necessarily, but it's actually for me to make a determination, like give you my opinion on what we're talking about, whether whatever we're talking about might be inappropriate or kind of veering off topic, or if you want to know if it's kind of relevant, or if you want to know maybe would this amendment or this motion help us along, maybe you would say point of inquiry, and then we can think about it. Two things that I think are also a good reminder is that for most things you usually need a majority. However, a couple things you need 2/3 if it's to try to change or limit speech in a way. So if we're to make a motion to limit speech or to end speech, that would need 2/3. Or if you want to close debate, that would need 2/3. But I did some research, and actually I thought that lay on the table was a 2/3, but it's actually a majority in the materials that I saw. So I thought it was 2/3, but according to the research I've done, a table motion is actually a majority. So I think that's a good thing to know as well. And also, a table motion is not really debatable. So you're kind of just saying, are we going to table this? Yes or no? And then kind of move on. Another thing that I think would be very useful for us is calling for orders of the day. So if we're having a discussion on a topic and you think that some of the speakers are kind of veering off in another direction, or maybe even introducing another item that's not being taken up currently, if someone says, Mr. Chair, I call for the orders of the day, that's a reminder to us to look at the agenda and kind of get back on topic, kind of stop going off on like a side lane or a sidebar, and kind of to get back on it. And I think those are kind of like the main things that I wanted to go over. I think just generally, I would say I'm looking to the executive officers and to the other council people as well to be maybe a little bit more participatory in keeping us in order and keeping us expedient and making our time meaningful and useful for the public, so that I don't always have to be the one necessarily to seem authoritarian, which is not what I want to do. Because if one person is always talking, it kind of seems like it's their show, but it's all of our show. It's the public show. It's the rest of the council show as well. Are there any questions? Okay, go ahead, Madam Treasurer.
I think also one of the things we have to review is the inability for some people to stay on mute during a meeting when it's not their time to speak, and talking over other people when they expect to want their turn and speaking over people. That's a big problem that we've been having a lot. And it puts a lot of work into like Vic to keep people on mute, constantly, and muting them. And I know I've talked to other neighborhood councils about what they're doing. And I talked to Octaviano about it. And one of the things that we can do is if we warn someone that if they can't, the board, if they can't stay on mute and be the example as board members to stay on mute until they're called on, then they move them over to attendees list, and they can stay over there where their mute button is completely controlled until they raise their hand, and just be cognizant that they're over there when vote matters come in. But that's what Central's doing with a couple of their people right now.
Okay, and that's a good point. I did speak to Octaviano and the city attorney as well recently, and they did say that there is a little bit of a difference on muting or limiting the speech between a board member and a member of the public, and they stressed that if it's a member of the public, generally you want to really listen to the speech, although you don't have to give them complete mute and unmute privileges. You're correct, Melanie. And so that is one tactic that we could do, is move people over to the attendees list. Hopefully we won't have to do that very often. However, I think it kind of goes with just being civil and remembering that talking over someone just in general society isn't always the best thing to do. And then especially in the meetings, because when someone's being recognized, we want to listen to what they have to say, because it hopefully will lead us to our goal, which is to improve the public. Mr. Craig Goldfarb, go ahead. Go ahead, Craig.
Okay. You know, muting board members goes against Robert's Rules of Orders. You have motions that you can make, or points of order, etc., that have to be making. So muting board members, democracy is not everything, but a lot of the stuff that's happening is board members aren't being recognized, so they have to speak up. You personally go out, meaning Christian Guzman, goes out of their way to recognize people from the community and just let board members sit. You did it 3 times that I recall in the last meeting. That was very clear and egregious. You can't sit there and mute board members just because you're into whatever it is and your point of view has to go before everybody else. It's not a point. This is a matter about freedom of speech and board members being given their due, not about, oh, you don't like what that person has to say, so you're going to mute them, which happens a lot.
Okay. Well, just addressing the standing rules do indicate that we should listen to the public. And actually, I believe it says we should listen to the public before the board members speak. And so if we wanted to change the rule, we could change it. But I think that that's the reason that I have been practicing the way I've been recognizing the public and the council, just to observe that rule. Also in the rule, we don't necessarily have to speak twice. We can just speak once if there's a limit on time. So I do think it's important to hear a lot of different points of views, but sometimes time might allow for that. Thank you for your comments. Before we hear you again, Craig, let's see if there's anyone else who wants to speak. Okay, go ahead, Craig.
Am I still unmuted? Okay. It's
Yeah.
still, you're still not addressing the censorship issue. It's got, you're you guys have been heavy-handed on putting the mute button on there and not listening to people and recognizing other people in the community rather than board members. I mean, it's not a thing about saying, oh, the rules say the standing rules and the way the member works, that we make a motion, you get public comment, and then after the public comment, we should be discussing. Not, oh, we have to debate with everybody in the public. I don't think that's what the intention is, and that doesn't lead to much. But the other side of it is the censorship that is going on through the board because they don't like what somebody else is saying, which includes you're censoring board members by recognizing people in the community before you're recognizing board members. After they've had their chance at community, they get 2 or 3 hits because they get to make public comment, and then they can come back and argue with the board. This is not a good way to run a meeting.
Okay, well, thank you for the comment. Again, I would refer to the standing rules as sort of a guide until we agree as a council to change the standing rules, and we'll take Madam Treasurer Melanie Lebrecq now.
Yeah, the standing rules state that the stakeholders, because I was even corrected on this and I was referred back to read them and saw that our standing rules say that the stakeholders are first on any comment on any agenda item or at all. They get to comment first, and then it goes before the board. And then it also says that there's 1 round of questions of everybody, including stakeholders and board members, 1 round around, and then it's up to the chair to continue it again if you'd like in a time consistency for whether or not he wants to take questions around a second time. There's no like automatic given that you get to speak 2 times on a subject. So
Okay, thank you, Melanie, for your comment. So if there are no questions on rules of order in particular, then we're sort of veering into the next item, which is reviewing the council's responsibility in keeping the meetings orderly. So we'll leave 5 seconds if anyone has a question on a particular rule of order before we move on to that. Okay, again, so we are a council, so we're a democratic body made up of multiple members, not just me, not just the executive board. And so it's all of our responsibility together, including the public, to make sure that our meetings are civil and orderly and that we're actually getting something done meaningfully, I believe. And so I would like to see more participation from the council and from my executive officers to that end. So if you want any guidance or mentoring and such to accomplish that, I should say, there are many resources on the internet. I think the Empower LA has some leadership resources. I am more than willing to speak with any of you on the phone or via email if you have any questions on how we can keep our meetings more orderly. I think that some of our executive officers would also be happy to speak with anyone from the council. Or if there's anyone from the public who might be a community leader, I think we have a few in attendance that are members of other neighborhood councils or have been members of council committees, so they might have their own unique perspective. But in essence, I am saying that in our future meetings, I think it would be good if we can all kind of agree that the responsibility in keeping the meeting orderly is up to all of us, not just to one person or a few. Any comments? We'll look for hands. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Vice President.
Yeah, and I agree that we have obviously a mutual shared responsibility vis-a-vis the conduct in the meetings. However, it is really with the authority of the chair of any particular meeting, and of course the president, to essentially give the you or whoever else is present as that additional layer of authority to kind of make those things happen in terms of how the meetings run, so that to whatever extent seems right in the moment, I don't have a problem kind of asserting those things on behalf of the board, the executive committee. But I think we should also, in terms of the membership of the executive committee, be cognizant of at least what the nominal boundaries are in terms of the president, whomever that happens to be, is responsible for X, Y, and Z. And if we were to take those things on, it should be some sort of like, other than this, some kind of explicit understanding that we do that, and that people not necessarily take on things that might otherwise be presidential functions, just because it seems like the right thing to do in the moment. It could be, but I'd like to make sure that we kind of check on those things to make sure we're not well, and also make sure that 2 people aren't trying to do the same thing at the same time, but just to make sure that it's all on the same page.
Your point is well taken, Mr. Vice President, and I would say that as president, I'm here to serve you, and that's my goal, to serve you in the public. And if you want some entertainment and some educational value, I would look up on YouTube, or maybe even the House of Commons own website. If you look up the United Kingdom's House of Commons, the chair there does a very good job historically, and it's pretty wild too. It's kind of fun. So I would look at how they keep their meetings in order, and maybe we want to go for that route, which is kind of like to shout out order over and over again until order is had. But that is a cool way of having democracy over in the UK, something that maybe we could model here. Any other questions or comment? Okay, if not, then let's move on to the next item. And the next item before us is Oh, go ahead, Madam Treasurer. Did you want to speak on the next item or are you speaking?
Yeah, on the next item.
Okay, so the next item of business before us is a discussion and possible action on the new code of conduct. So go ahead, Madam Treasurer.
My recommendation for this is that it is so like, the red line in it is so in depth, the changes that they made. It's huge, it's pages. And it's gonna take a good portion of a board meeting to review this. So what I said, if we were to send it out dry now for the next board meeting. So my recommendation is that we send it out with a cover letter explaining to people to review it, read it over, read the red lines, then come ready for input or even send input on it before the meeting. And that way we'll be ready to draft a CIS for this, because that's what they want from Bonk, is us to weigh in on this. So I think we need to with knowledge, weigh in on it as a board and not just on the fly, just weigh in on it.
Okay, thank you. And before I recognize Mr. Vice President, I would like to ask, what is the timeline? Does anyone know on when the
No.
city council would like to pass it?
They didn't send a timeline.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Vice President, and then we'll see who else has comments.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Melanie. I think that, in the past, I can remember many occasions where people have sort of professed ignorance of, or, unfamiliarity with things that were posted or were on the agenda in discussion, but not everybody was up to speed. And, I don't feel that it's the role of the executive committee necessarily to sort of babysit people's understandings of these topics, but for a particularly important thing like this, despite having it, let's say, on the website or whatever, I think it would be a good idea to sort of proactively and, in a redundant layer of information to send this out to the board with a note that, this is going to come up, please familiarize yourself. So we don't have, and this actually goes back to speaking to keeping the meetings orderly. We don't have to sit around and wait for people to develop some familiarity with the topic while we're trying to do it. And so I think it would be a good idea for like critical issues like this to make sure people have multiple opportunities, including having it sent to their inbox to be up to speed.
Okay. I would like to take Laurie Jacobs and then Doug Eberhard.
I was going to suggest you take Doug first, but I'll go. So I wasn't able to attend the Bonk meeting on February 1st where they reviewed this, but I did dig to find this red line to provide to you guys. What was interesting to me is they apparently voted on this and said we want to get input from the neighborhood councils, but to my knowledge, nobody from Bonk or from Dunn sent anything to the neighborhood councils to say, okay, here's our draft red line version for you to review and give you a date when they'd like to get feedback. So maybe it'll show up in your whatever you get from Raquel, in the update of what's going on in Dunn. So my guess is that you don't have to give your feedback at this February 14th meeting, because you might not have enough time to do it justice. You might have until March to do this, but to my knowledge, nothing's come out and nobody's given you a date. So now I think Doug maybe can shed a little more light on it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Laurie. And Doug, before you go ahead, do you know if there's a timeline?
I have no idea. I do not believe that there is. I mean, they have, I've been told by one commissioner that they have 5 or 6 more policies they're waiting to start rolling off the assembly line at Bonk. But as far as this goes, I would guess it's probably going to be another 60 or 90 days minimum. But what I wanted to say basically is I did read through the red line. 90% of it is sort of a standard boilerplate that comes right out of the city's workplace equity stuff. And frankly, it's very much along the lines of, labor law, that essentially puts everything in there up to and including the kitchen sink to cover any and all possibilities. This is all legal stuff. The crux of the matter for most neighborhood councils is actually not this stuff that's there, but who gets the authority to suspend a board member. And nobody trusts Raquel Beltran. That's just how it is. I would point out to you that the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils put out their agenda today. And Valley Alliance represents a third of the neighborhood councils in LA. They have 33 or 34 members. Their motion is to oppose the part of the amendment that would give the general manager or any department or city entity the right to suspend a board member. Essentially what they're saying is only board members can be suspended by their boards. That's what they're after. Okay. That I think is the sticking point, because I can tell you what I see from 20 years of experience is that somebody says something rude in a meeting or rolls their eyes more than once or does whatever. And despite what I have been told by Commissioner Lynn Schaefer, I can see a situation in which somebody in, an overzealous NEA or whoever decides, oh, we need to suspend a board member. It's going to be an interesting mess if this thing gets passed. That's what I would pay attention to if I were you guys.
Okay, thank you, Doug. And I tend to agree. I also read the red lining, and I think that the only part that really caught me off guard a little bit, or that made me think a little bit, was, you're right, one, kind of giving that power, kind of centralizing it a little too much. I think it's better to have it a little decentralized and let the neighborhood councils make that determination of suspension. I think that just kind of goes with the policy of like actual democratic leadership. But then also I thought that the bullying was like kind of relevant. Like I thought the bullying, maybe a neighborhood council person should not just glaze over the whole thing and sign it and date it. Maybe they should consider that and look at their own actions, because bullying it's easy to fall into. It's easy to be bullied and not really consider it bullying, and it's easy to bully sometimes. So that I actually do think could use some reflection, but all the other stuff tend to agree with what Doug said. Go ahead, Madam Treasurer.
I'm sorry, I could just interrupt. I have to hop off. Someone else wanted to share the screen. I'll be back on mobile in just a couple of minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Go ahead, Madam.
I agree with what Doug was saying, because I looked it over and read it. And the redlining stuff is like a boiler, like legal document that would be like from a workplace type, policy type thing. And then the only thing that really changed, when we were having a problem with the alleged stuff, they changed the wording to if it's the allegation is found with credit or merit. They added those words into it. It didn't have that before. And then the thing with Raquel, I noticed that too. I was kind of going, one person is going to have all authority to decide whether it's meritless or not, and suspend a board member. So it's kind of, I don't know.
Go ahead, Councilman Craig Goldfarb.
On how we're going to proceed with this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you finished, Melanie.
Okay.
When she's, go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
Okay, you just gave it to me. I haven't seen this red line version or any new version, and I was wondering why it wasn't included in the packet since you were going to discuss it.
We just got it today. It's been like the secret document that we couldn't get, and we just got it right before the meeting.
Okay. Could you send me a copy of it?
Yeah, it'll be sent to the entire council, of course. Okay, well, I would also say if there's no specific timeline, maybe we kind of do how we do bylaws changes and sort of introduce it. Maybe allow for a few minutes of questions and then just say, perhaps it'll go to the bylaws committee, and at our next meeting in March, we'll make a comment. That might be good. Okay. Alrighty then, well, do we want to go on to number 6? Who wants to introduce number 6, which is a discussion of code of conduct enforcement? Okay, well, if no one wants to specifically introduce it, I'm not sure who wanted it on the agenda, but I would say that, again, it's kind of important not to always just glaze over things that you're kind of bound to and just sign it and date it. But I think the code of conduct is relatively simple in that stay on task. When you're talking in the neighborhood council, you usually want to speak on the item. Obviously, name calling, harassment, or talking about anything else is it's totally irrelevant. It's inappropriate. So I think if you follow those kind of simple things, you'll be in line with the code of conduct. And then if not, if you're speaking expletives or making threats of violence or something kind of incredible that we hopefully will never see, there will be some sort of a disciplinary action. And I think that the council should immediately do so if that were to be the case. Let's have, go ahead, Doug.
Okay, thanks. This is why what you said earlier about enforcing rules, parliamentary procedure is really, really important. And it's not just the presiding officer's job, it's also the job of the other members. If a presiding officer isn't doing the job of enforcing the rules, which are not the presiding officer's rules, they are the board's rules. And if the board doesn't like what the presiding officers do, they should call them out. And if they don't like the rules, they should change them. But they should never blame the presiding officer for doing their job. And I think sometimes that's what happens. Board members should never, ever, ever be afraid to call out point of order when anybody in a meeting is out of order. One of the reasons I think that Dunn in particular has been so pushy on the Code of Conduct Amendments thing is because there are too many boards where you have too many people who don't know the rules, and we'll have board members who act up and nobody enforces anything against them. So that's really important. And I have one other quick thing. I found it amusing that, Kristen, you referred to the House of Commons. I actually like to listen to Today in Parliament on BBC4 occasionally. I did hear some of the debate regarding Boris Johnson and parties at 10 Downing Street, including the part where the leader of the Scottish National Party got up and called the Prime Minister a liar, which is against the rules. By the way, they don't have Robert's rules. They use something called Erskine May in the House of Commons. And the speaker called out the leader of the Scottish Nationalist Party for calling another member a liar, asked him to withdraw his words. He refused, and the appropriate punishment was then exacted. I have to ask you to leave the chamber. In that case, what they do at the House of Commons is they essentially kick the member out of the chamber for the rest of the day's session. So it becomes what is, in essence, a one-day suspension. Over the years, I have talked about the idea that when a board member is truly acting up, that the board should have the right to suspend that individual, either for the rest of that meeting or potentially for the next meeting. I've never seen a neighborhood council do that. I've never seen it in the rules, but I have to tell you, it's a tool we might think about.
Okay, thanks, Doug. And again, yeah, check out the House of Commons if you have some free time. I think it's informative and entertaining. Laurie Jacobs.
Thank you. Doug said a lot of what I was going to say too. And I'm just wonder the oath of office, how that relates to upholding the code of conduct. I myself have been the target of harassment and bullying by board members, and which is a violation of ethics and code of conduct and your oath of office. And it would be nice if, when those things happen, that the person or persons are admonished, that it's mentioned, okay, that is not acceptable behavior. Any board and stakeholders can have discussions in a respectful manner. You can agree to disagree. We should be having difference of opinions. So I want to hear opinions that are different than mine, but not at the risk of being attacked and being harassed. And nobody should feel unsafe to be able to speak up for fear that they're going to have name calling or put down or accused of lying or accused of having a hidden agenda. Those are pretty strong words to be throwing out. And while stakeholders actually have a little more leash, I'll say, to make comments than board members, because stakeholders, we have not signed anything that says we'll follow something. I always do try to be respectful regardless. But in the last 6-8 months, I've just seen a lot of lack of civility, and it's such a poor reflection to our community. And more importantly, I believe it really gets in the way of the work that we want to get done. So Christian, I just look for any type of guidance or leadership to board members, bad mouthing our board, saying we're horrible, we don't do anything. These are not productive comments. You're allowed to say them, but it would be nice if people had a shared mission of remembering why they took this office, to represent their community and improve the quality of life for their community. And it's really sad when the meetings get off rail because of those personal attacks. So I'm glad some of these things will be looked at. And I agree with everything else that in no way should the general manager have the teeth to make decisions for neighborhood councils. What happened to our autonomy to set things up for ourselves? So anyway, thank you, Christian, for letting me speak.
You're welcome. All right, Councilman Craig Goldfarb, go ahead.
Okay, another, Doug, you're always famous of telling everybody, we're all adults here, and we are. And whether you like what you're setting up is, and as the last speaker illustrates, this is about censorship. It's about accusing everybody else of everything and just censoring them because you don't like what they have to say. The community and other boards members have different positions, and they should be able to discuss it. When you find people acting up on the board, it's because some board members or executive board members feel that they need to censor other people so that we won't hear them, and they may get a point across that may not reflect their opinion, and they can then suppress them. And this has currently been happening a lot. It's this adversarial thing that has been carrying over from the last board previously to the last leadership, always accusing people of stuff, taking umbrage about somebody having an opinion, the whole 9 yards. But this is about censorship, and we need to stop censoring. It's what's making this thing bad, not what's making it the anything better.
Okay, Madam Treasurer, did you have an additional comment on the code of conduct enforcement?
Yeah, I think the reason this was put on the agenda was just to have a conversation about, I think we're getting away from what everybody has, signed when they signed the code of conduct. When we took our oath of office and signed the code of conduct, I think as a board, we've kind of just got out of sync of, following the rules and being civil and being, all of what we're supposed to do, because in the code of conduct, it states, and I'm going to paraphrase here, something about being civil and being ethical and all of that, and being respectful. And sometimes that isn't carried over all over the board, and I think we need to get back to basics again with that.
Okay. So we do have, I think, some time to make comments on the code of conduct and the amendments that the city is proposing. So perhaps we will kind of briefly take it up at our next meeting and then have a committee look at it and then act on it in March. And I think that we all are in understanding that it's a shared responsibility to make sure that our meetings are being conducted civilly and in an effective way. We'll move on now then to number 7, which is the mayoral and sheriff candidate forum. So I'm of the understanding that some Democratic clubs are organizing a candidate forum to be had in San Pedro, and they're going to invite the mayor candidates and also the sheriff's candidates. And they would like to know if we want to participate in some way, whether it be attending or promoting it or co-sponsoring it. I'm not exactly sure, but we can discuss that with them and amongst each other at the meeting if we want to do that. Laurie Jacobs.
Thank you. I volunteered to help with that format. It'll be on February 27th, and it will be in person at the Warner Grand. It's the LA mayor candidates, it's the LA County Sheriff candidates, and I believe it's also the mayoral candidates for the city of Long Beach, our sister city. While it's being put on by the Democratic Club, it is not just for Democratic candidates, it is for every candidate is being invited. I believe, Doug can correct me if I'm wrong, the caveat is you have to have fundraised a certain amount of money to qualify to be invited. I think it's 400,000, but I'm not positive. But I think there are so many things that are important in our community, and we want to encourage people to vote, but we want to encourage people to vote informed, that they're well educated and they have the ability to hear from the candidates. And so it's going to be a panel discussion. And so I think it would be great if our neighborhood council encouraged this democracy in action and getting people educated to be responsible at the polls. I can't see any reason, Christian, why the neighborhood council would not support this.
Okay, thank you. Madam Treasurer.
Yeah, I talked to Octaviano about this today, and he says we can like sponsor it, like advertise it, and we can like physically, like if those that want to individually can volunteer, but we cannot give any financial, or it has to go to the city attorney and the city clerk's office, because it's they have to weigh in because it's a political type thing.
Okay. So if we're promoting it on our website or our e-blast, are we a sponsor of sorts, and is that okay? Do you
Yeah,
know that, Madam
that
Treasurer?
is okay, but no financial.
Okay, very good. Well, I think it would be a good thing for the public to attend. I know that it, as you all have probably run for office, including the neighborhood council or something else. Some people are best on one-on-one campaigning, and some people really like to be on stage and kind of to campaign at multiple people at a time. And so there are different ways that people can become informed and different ways that people can inform others. I think this is one healthy way to go about it. There's no other comment. I think that we should have that on our agenda then for discussion and possible action. And then we'll move on then to number 8, which is a discussion of the actual agenda, the other items on the agenda for our February stakeholder meeting, and including the business seat election. And then we'll kind of move on down B, C, D, E. I think I saw an email from Diana, not received any applications. So if that's the case, I suppose we could extend it, or we don't really have to fill the vacancy right away. I don't think it's okay. We're giving the public a chance, and so we want to let them have the opportunity to do so in the future. I think that would be fine too. Madam Treasurer.
Yes, our up on our website, it shows there's one.
Oh, okay, that's good. Go ahead, Craig. Go ahead, Craig.
It's taking a while for those unmutes to come. Yes, there has been one person. It's sort of a little irregular since they put in their application on the 1st and they didn't inform us until, like 5 o'clock today. And I'm on the elections and bylaws committee. I think we should have a discussion about, we had already discussed that these things would be, as soon as people apply, that we'd put them up on the thing. I would think that it'd be encouraging, and when they see somebody apply, that other people might apply. This just means that we didn't give other people the opportunity to apply when they saw somebody else was applying. Thank you.
Laurie, go ahead, Laurie.
My understanding is that the applications, I guess, went through Christina's office and there was some technical snafu. But regardless, I don't see the point here. Anybody could have applied. The outreach committee did a lot of work on publicizing this, trying to get the word out, not just to Northwest, but to all of San Pedro. And the fact that one candidate wasn't on the website until today, to me, if somebody was interested in running, they would have applied. They weren't going to sit there and look every day at the website to see if somebody else applied. Either they're interested in being a member of the board or they're not. So I see no reason not to continue. The application was submitted within the deadline. I see no reason for any further discussion.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think maybe we will consider the candidate, and there's always the option of not appointing the candidate. So hopefully it'll be a good candidate and we'll be happily appointing them. But if they're not there or something, we could always wait until the following month. And then with that, we'll move on to the next item, which is, we're looking at the sample agenda now, I think. I don't know, Madam Treasurer, did you want to speak on the MER or the budget in any way?
Just that the MER will have to be a vote and a second on it because it wasn't available from the city clerk, because our meeting was on the 2nd and they don't release the MER until like anywhere between the 5th and the 7th of the month. And our regular meeting was on the 2nd. So it'll have to go before the board for a motion and a vote.
Okay, very good. Well, I think it'll be kind of like the standard waiting for the committees to provide us with their motions, and then we have sort of like a sample here that we kind of follow month to month, and that's kind of.
And the NPGs, we've gotten only one application, so I suggest everybody's trying to get NPGs out there to get people to start applying.
What was the MPG deadline?
It's not until March, so they've got plenty of time. So that's probably
Oh.
what they're waiting on, because they do have plenty of time to apply.
Well, that's good. If we know anyone, let's share our newsletter or the website link so that they can consider applying then for any other nonprofits. This seems to be pretty standard. Is there any comment on the standard agenda format, or do we want to introduce a new topic? It's not on there. Go ahead, Madam Treasurer.
Did you get a hold of Ike? Officer Ike?
Oh, yes, I did. Yeah,
Okay.
so I spoke in email to the new senior lead officer and I asked for a written report because I always think, kind of as Craig said, that if the public can have information earlier, that's good, and they can make more informed decisions or provide more informed questions. So he said that he's going to endeavor to get me the report by Thursday, and if he does, then we'll have it on the agenda over the weekend, and then maybe we'll take a couple questions, or we'll just see that the report is a good report. Go ahead, Laurie Jacobs.
I'm sorry, I was a little slow. Going back to the NPGs, we allowed for longer time than normal to apply for more outreach. And I guess we're seeing what we always see. They wait till the last minute. It's just, I know that the Coastal Neighborhood Council, they also have an open call, and I don't believe they've received very many either, but the outreach committee is continuing to notify people. But for some reason, organizations feel better doing it at the last minute. So I'm not concerned that we're not going to get more applications. I just wanted to let you know that we actually have an extra 30 days than the amount of time we normally did, assuming people have issues going on with COVID and whatever. We wanted to give them a little leeway there.
Okay, great. Well, if there's no other comment, I would just say that we'll proceed with the standard agenda and take our motions from our committees and any other resolutions that might come in, and we'll discuss those at our next meeting. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, seconded to adjourn the executive meeting. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, then, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for attending the Northwest San Pedro Neighborhood Council Executive Meeting, and we'll see you hopefully at our full board meeting next Valentine's Day, which is in 1 week. Goodbye, everyone.